Well, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending this session on solutions C3PAOs and their assessors can use to manage the CMMC accreditation process. We appreciate those of you that have joined the session. I believe there's some other competing webinars going on today, so really appreciate those that have been able to attend. I'm Tom Leahy. I am the SVP of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. And with me in this presentation is our CEO, Sanjay Kumar. We both have grown up in the compliance, risk, and accreditation world for probably 30, 40 years now, and very familiar with the types of processes that you all are going to be going through. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. All the presentation materials, the content will be shared with you at the end of the presentation, along with this webinar recording. You'll note in the Zoom meetings that there is a Q&A area, so please address any questions you may have as we conduct the presentation. We will go ahead and take those at the end of the presentation. And then we'll also note there will be a couple of polls, 2 polls today as we go through the presentation. At the conclusion of this webinar, you'll also have the opportunity to indicate whether you might be interested in using the SureShield platform for some of your activities. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We've already gone through the introduction. We'll talk a little bit about the current state and timelines, which you're all very familiar with. Perhaps a number of you joined the town hall meeting yesterday that had some updates on where things are at, what your roles are as a C3PAO, and what will be some of those service challenges to go along with that. We'll talk about the market opportunity briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you can leverage technology to help manage the services that you and your organization will be providing to these OSCs, how PartnerShield, our solution, can help in that process. We'll do a brief product demo, we'll take questions, and then, as I mentioned, for those of you who are interested in evaluating the platform, we will make that offer and set up time to actually get you set with that. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And I'm sure a lot of this, obviously, those of you who are in this process are very familiar. That at least any organization that's seeking certification is ready can start applying for that now. Obviously, one of the challenges that was noted is that there's only today 4 quote unquote certified C3PAOs. There's based upon what's viewed in the marketplace, there's about 187 that are applying for that process. So hopefully the AB will get moving to make sure all of you that will be conducting these services will get that in place, because there's going to be a lot of providers, as we all know, that are going to need to go through this process. Right today, they estimate that there's about 300,000 providers in the defense industrial base, your OSCs, or organizations that will be seeking compliance. And they'll need to choose a C3PAO to do that audit, and obviously get this done before 2025. If they have got their good processes in place, it's probably better to do that sooner rather than later, because even though it has to be done by the 2025, the sooner they're able to get that certification and accreditation, the better it will be for them. So if you were to just look at it on average, of that 300,000, with over today about 190 organizations that are planning on being C3PAOs, those numbers round out on average to the opportunity to service close to 1,600 clients. I think it's 1,550. So a big opportunity, and whatever those service charges are going to be for going through that, you can just multiply by those numbers and get an estimation that if you had an average number of those, what the revenue business opportunity is for this. And more importantly than just as important as the business opportunity is the need to get this done and done in a very efficient process. For, as we know, the reason this came into place was because current processes did not seem to be doing what needed to be done to protect this very sensitive data from getting exposed to others. So, you know, the roles that you all have is either a C3PAO or the assessors that work with you. And as we've also noted, in some cases, you may also be acting as an assessor to help advise the company. And in some cases, you may be doing it to do the accreditation process. Obviously, you can't do both, but you'll see as we go through this how OSCs today and also RPOs are using this to help get those groups ready for the accreditation process. And then obviously the types of things you'll need to be doing if an OSC is contracted with you, obviously will help getting them prepared for the certification readiness, to conduct your assessments and your audits of those, to obviously identify where there are gaps that may be in those environments that can be directed back to these groups to make sure that they get those gaps hopefully fixed. In some cases, if not, it can obviously affect their ability to actually get certified. Obviously, to provide guidance to help meet the certification requirements. And then as part of that process, evaluating whether they have the right processes and solutions in place to protect the CUI data that they're managing. It's a very critical component of the whole CMMC framework process. And then ultimately, for you all as those acting on behalf of the DoD to provide that accreditation seal to these organizations. So as we talked about earlier, a lot of things that will need to be done. And really, even on average, if you were to get that average number of clients, servicing close to 1,600 potential clients can be quite challenging. And as we also know, this is not going to be a static process. When someone goes through the accreditation process, they're going to need to go through it again at some point, and they're going to need to have tools in place to assure that they're doing this, you know, they're protecting this information on a continuous basis, not just on a static basis. So as a C3PAO, obviously you're going to need some tools that will help you conduct the required services. You'll want to have things that are going to make it easier for you to collaborate and distribute work, both at the level of your assessors and perhaps at the level of the OSCs that you're working with. Ideally, tools to help you manage all your clients and the services in one area to limit the amount of, you know, to improve efficiencies. You'll want to have means to really identify where these gaps are, and then effective tools and reporting tools that can help, you know, validate what, you know, the ultimately that certification seal. And while we're not familiar today at this point with what some of those scoring tools are, we're obviously very familiar with the NIST 800-171 scoring assessments, and we can assume that there will be something similar that will be used. Our platform we're going to talk to you about today is very configurable and customizable. That can help you, once you've got the information you need, create the reports you may desire, as well as any types of validation scoring for giving that seal of approval. So with that, I'm going to briefly turn it over to Sanjay to talk a little bit about how you can leverage technology like that provided by SureShield to assist in this process.
Thank you, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Tom indicated, I mean, really it all boils down to how efficiently are you going to be able to address the market need that will be there from the OSCs for supporting them with some of these activities. The solutions that are available from SureShield that Tom is actually going to go into a demonstration of will actually highlight to you how you might be able to do audit for any type of CMMC maturity level type of OSC, and to be able to collaborate with them as well as with the assessors within your own organization. So it's a workflow environment that literally allows you to support multiple OSCs that might be working at different, or that might be designated within different maturity levels of CMMC. And Tom will highlight that. The other aspect is very clearly being able to identify for the OSCs and to work together with them on any compliance gaps that might be there for them to remediate, or for you to guide them on remediating those. You will also be able to leverage the software that we provide or solutions that we have available, which is a very, very key component of the CMMC requirements for certification, is the ability for the OSCs to be able to identify any CUI data that might be there within their environment. You as an assessor is to be able to determine whether they are protecting CUI data effectively or not. And we have a tool that actually you can deploy at the level of the OSCs to help determine that or make that particular assessment and evaluation for yourself. Additionally, you will, as Tom pointed out, today we very well understand the kind of reporting that is required at the level of the NIST frameworks as well as CMMC, and we provide those out of the box. The types of reports that might be required at the assessor level will be very similar, and our tool is very configurable to aid in that. Next slide, please. So how can PartnerShield, the tool that we actually make available to you as a C3PAO or as an assessor, is actually a portal that we call PartnerShield. And Tom is going to be going through this particular portal to give you an insight into how easy it will be for you to scale and conduct your business for the audits that might be required. The three tools that he's primarily going to focus on is going to be CompliShield. The CompliShield tool allows for automated auditing to be conducted for the different type of assessments for any type of OSC depending upon their maturity level, reporting and scoring from all of those assessments that you can then provide back to the OSCs to show them whether they're in compliance or not. And the other tool that I indicated to you earlier for the identification of CUI data. That tool can be deployed at the level of the OSCs, and it will feed back to you evidence of any sensitive data that might not necessarily be protected, or in terms of how it is being protected at the OSC level. So the key features of PartnerShield, again, it's a self-service portal. Once we enable it and make it available to you, it's cloud-based, completely white labeled. So in front of your OSCs, if you're going to provide access to any component of this to the OSCs, it is white labeled for your organization. You will be able to manage all of the clients from a single interface. Very, very easy for you to scale with this to support few clients or hundreds of clients at the same time. You will be able to activate an CMMC audit framework with relative ease for the OSCs that you will be servicing. There's built-in workflow automation that allows you to distribute out work in a very secure manner, either to the OSC staff that might be needing to respond to you for any compliance gaps and the like, or to your assessors internally within your organization, or even with third-party individuals, the RPO that might be aiding the overall assessment process. Included with that is automated reporting at the OSC level, as well as the ability to have a comprehensive look across your client base as well to determine the status of assessments or audits that you are doing. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tom. I think he's going to go through a demonstration of the solution at this point.
I am, and just before we get started on that, Sanjay, I'm going to just launch a very brief poll for the folks that are here, basically asking whether you have, software or technology tools in place today to help in this process. And if you we'll just take a minute or two if you have a chance to go ahead and answer those questions or that question. We'll just give it about 30 seconds and then go on from there. Great. Well, it's about equally distributed. There's a third of the group that says they have some tools. There's a third that say they don't. And then there's a third that say they're not exactly sure. And actually that numbers just went up to more of those not having tools in place. Great. So we're going to show you some tools that you can use. And even for those that say yes, you might see that there's some additional value you can get out of a platform that we're going to show you today. So with that, let me go into the product demonstration. And Sanjay, I'm just going to exit here and ask if folks can see my screen. Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
And so I want to, first of all, also just point out that what you're going to see, as he mentioned, is very highly configurable and customizable. We have a lot of RPOs and actually groups that are OSCs that are already using the solution that we provide to do their own kind of self-assessments and audits right now and getting prepared for this. And so we're going to show you a little bit of what those views are like, how you can manage all of your clients in this process. And then depending upon how you plan on conducting your means for doing your audit, how this environment can be used for doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm signing in as a quote unquote C3PAO. And if I had any tasks, so if I'd assigned different types of tasks or responsibilities out for either different assessors or OSCs to provide information to me, those tasks would show up here initially in what we call this portal environment. So before I go into going into looking at customers, so you can see here, if I'm in here, I can actually just begin to go type in and look for a particular customer that I may be managing. But also to point out in terms of inviting new customers or new groups into this, it's as simple as using this customer, what we call manage customer tool setup. You'll also note in this portal environment, it's branded so that you can actually brand it and white label it for yourself. But if I were to go in this particular demo evaluation area, I have 6 different groups that I'm managing within here as well. And you can see what it's showing me are the quote unquote modules that have been assigned to those. In this case, what are the different levels that I might be evaluating this particular provider at? So in this particular demonstration area, you can see we have different customers that are getting evaluated at all different levels of those environments. So if I wanted to actually go pick one of those customers, I'm just going to type in Doe briefly and go to that. And you'll see over here, I have the applications that have been enabled that I'm working with for those particular customers. If I go into the CompliShield Manager, you'll see because this Doe is at a level 3 compliance, it's showing me that there's 130 controls that I'm evaluating for those. And because we've begun a process for this, it's even showing me those that are through this process where we've begun to do the evaluation, those that are in compliance today, those that might not be, and then those that are maybe right now because we just started the process have not been answered. So when I go into this, you'll see, again, it's important to note that what it provides me are all the different questions, the control IDs, the risk ratings. Just a note on these risk ratings can be configured based upon how, on the back end as to how critical you rate those. So while we've got them in here for demonstrations, all is very high, you actually have the ability to go in and modify those based upon your own criteria of rating for those, what the domain is. And then it goes into the particular requirements in those areas. Now, if you have, for instance, either you're wanting to push this out to the OSC to provide you this information, or whether you're having your assessors go out, you may have different assessors that have different levels of expertise that you're going to have evaluate within that organization. You can actually pick those up. So let's say I just had some people that I had that were just, going to do information gathering on the access control areas. What this filter does is it filters that down. And then all I would need to do is click on those and basically decide how I want to assign that information out. I could assign it to an assessor, or I could even push it out to someone outside the organization, asking for a request for a response where they can go in and then gather and conduct that information that we need to help do the evaluation. It's a simple, once you're doing that, really going in and clicking on the different questions will bring up those questions and then basically address what the citation is around it. If I've begun the process, what have I identified in terms of where they're at? The ability to add comments that I have for those purposes of evaluation. And then again, depending on how I've assigned this out, the ability to upload evidence that will help provide the evidence as to why I have scored or why we are scoring this as a compliant, non-compliant, or whatever that may be. And also associated with that are areas where they can provide things like their policies and procedures, best practices, guidance on how to answer these particular questions. So as those get gathered for you, whether you're doing that, whether your assessors are doing that, or whether you're asking your OSCs to do that, you can use this platform to actually centralize and manage all those. And of course, as that information and the audit around this gets gathered and completed, it will obviously lead to the scoring that can be done for those. So if I were to just come back here and go ahead and let's just pick a different, I'm going to give you an idea of what kind of data can be pulled out of here. So this is where, again, as I mentioned, you can use PartnerShield for doing all of the various types of audits that you may do around those frameworks. I will come back and show you actually how you activate a customer, how simple that is. But once you've begun to gather that data, again, as we mentioned, then you'll have various types of reporting tools that are available to you. And for this demonstration purpose, this particular customer is also doing things to make sure that they're currently in compliance with NIST requirements. You'll see that our reporting areas allow you to gather the various types of reports that you may need or want that you will ultimately use for determining whether you are going to accredit that client. You can share this data with those clients as well. If I were to just, in this case, I'm looking at a self-assessment on a report of compliance around my CMMC level 3 compliance. If I were to run that report, again, it's going to go ahead and show me, based upon all those controls that have been answered, how many are within compliance, how many are in the remediation process, what might be applicable, and what still needs to be done. Again, if you have new scoring or ways in which you're going to use this data based upon the risk ratings as well to determine, all that can be configured. And then within here, you have the ability to do a variety of different things, which includes you can download this into Word, you can export any specific data into Excel, you can even schedule these reports. So maybe you need these to share within your internal team or to share externally with the clients that you are taking through the accreditation process. And again, as we mentioned, all configurable reporting that can be done based upon how you choose to go through that particular process. Just noting for those, you're certainly, I'm sure, familiar with the DFARS reports that are required right now that include a system security plan that needs to get submitted, the plan of action and milestone reports, and then of course the report on the 801 assessment score, which I assume will, most likely have something that will be generated to help do some scoring for your own organizations as it relates to the CMMC maturity levels. But again, having that information, we're able to go ahead and run those reports in real time at points of time as well. So because this is a continuous evaluation tool, as it gets updated, it will obviously then update based upon the most latest information that has been provided. And in the case of this particular provider, they're currently running at a NIST assessment score of 75. And again, it would show them all that information as to where they are in compliance and where they're not, and why that score is reflected as such. So I'm going to click out of here and just go back and point out again in the tools section in terms of setting up customers, how simple that is to do. So I had initially gone in and said, looked at my list of customers. Now let's say I have a new one that's come on and they've just contracted with me to do their to go ahead and do their accreditation audit. I simply go ahead and add the name of that customer, some information on that customer. I assign a default admin for that customer within my organization. And then in this case, I can go ahead and assign what are the different compliance or audit frameworks that I'm going to be auditing them against. So if I wanted to say, in this case, this particular client was going to go through a CMMC level 3 process, I simply activate that framework. And when I do that, then that will be the default framework that will be available for me to conduct, or my organization to conduct, the different information to obviously complete the audit, complete the assessment, to gather the required information to validate, how I've answered and how I've determined a compliance scoring or a compliance requirement on that particular group. So that is, again, just to point out the PartnerShield framework and how you can utilize this particular solution to conduct those processes for you. We understand as a C3PAO, the processes you will be doing are slightly different than, say, an RPO that's going and helping them do the assessment scores or do the pre-assessment preparation. But essentially, because of the configurability of this, it can be used to not only gather data you need. Obviously, if you have OSCs that are using this as well, they can even offer you access into their environment for you to go and look at all of their data, or for your assessors, if they're using that, to go ahead and be able to pull all that data in on those providers as well. That's how configurable and flexible this particular framework is. So I'm going to pause here, and primarily because, as Sanjay mentioned, we do have one other tool which we're not actually showing in this particular demonstration right now, but just to let you know that we have another solution that's basically an endpoint tool. We call it Hackshield, and that can be used actually for launching in a customer environment to identify where there's any exposed CUI data. Now, we do use the caveat right now that it's under the auspices of those customers to be marking that data appropriately. If they haven't, in some cases, that could lead to not being able to identify it, which obviously makes your process of doing a proper evaluation even more complex. But that tool can actually be set up to identify any critical data that you want it to look at. So for instance, if a customer that was going through this actually was working with, say they were servicing the hospital systems within the DoD. They may be collecting a lot of PHI data. So you can use this to determine what is the kind of data you want to see that could be exposed, and launch that utility, and it will tell you where that is. And then it will also let you know what types of levels of protection are on that data. Is it properly encrypted and the likes? So I'm going to pause here and open it up. I see, Sanjay, that it looks like we have some questions. Let me just go back to the presentation briefly. And again, just for all of you who are on right now, keep in mind what you're looking at is a relatively high level overview of the CompliShield or in the PartnerShield platform. As we mentioned, we're going to poll others to see if you want to have a deeper dive into this. There's a lot of different features and functionalities that we haven't covered here in this particular demonstration today, but as a follow-up for those who are interested, we will, reach out to you and go through this in either further detail. So really, how can this be used? Obviously, it can help in terms of streamlining and scaling the number of clients and customers that you're going to be able to manage. You can do that all in one environment. You can distribute that work and really more rapidly, hopefully help the OSCs that you're going to be evaluating, get them through the process as quickly as possible, so to help them secure their business and secure that business in the most, when I say secure, not secure for continuing on a contract, but to make sure that they're securely operating within this DIB environment, which is the most critical aspect of that. Obviously, the market opportunity is pretty sizable, as we talked about, with 300,000 potential providers needing to go through this process. So, leveraging technology can help you do what you need to do more efficiently. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any questions. And then as we're going through that, I will be launching a poll for those of you who are participating to see who may be interested in having some additional follow-up from us.
Good. I noticed that there was one question that has not yet been answered, but I did post it in the chat as well, because the same question got asked about FedRAMP authorization. So currently we are in the processes of undergoing that for FedRAMP authorization.
And Chandi, if you're on, and do you want to speak any further to that, or? But we are going through the process of getting FedRAMP certified.
Yeah, so we are getting there actually. Not yet got the approval, but we are in the process.
Let me see. I think how to get off mute. Tom, I'm not sure. I think the
So in the
attendees
webinar,
are muted. Yeah, in the webinar mode.
We
Sorry,
can't
go
do
ahead,
that.
Chandi.
Yeah, we can't do that in the webinar mode. There's no way to have voice.
Yeah, I think maybe someone wants to answer or ask a question directly. Is that right?
Right.
Sorry, we're not able to do that, but if there's interest, again, we can follow up with you directly in doing that. I'm going to go ahead and actually launch our poll. And Chandi, it looks like, have you been answering some of the questions that
Yes.
have been? Okay.
Yes.
I think that we've answered more around, questions of, are we going to make sure that we have that our system is properly protected as well? And the answer is obviously yes. So while we're taking on any other questions, let me just go ahead and launch the poll quickly for those of you who might be interested in having some additional follow-up from us. We are offering the ability to test this out in a completely open environment for you to kind of play with it and see where it may be of use to you. So I've gone ahead and opened that up for the folks that are still participating to ask if they would be interested in testing this out. And I know that we don't have a lot of folks, but I can, because of some overlap with other events, but the majority here, we see everyone's either interested in that, and a few that have said to contact them later. So I will make note, you should just all be prepared to have a follow-up directly from me to set up time to speak with you further and then get you set up on the platform itself. Great. So so you did answer the question for Sean. Sorry, I'm coming in later, so I'm just not sure. I'm assuming that those who are asking the questions are getting the answers to the question that they're asking.
Yes, yes, they are, Tom.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm not sure whether there are any other questions, just one other qualification. So there is no limit to the number of customers that you can actually deploy to support. In the end, the licensing that is done for this particular product is based upon the modules that are actually utilized, to service your end customers.
Yes, yes. So there's a cost, there's a modest cost for those that are asking for adding the customer and whatever it is, whatever the maturity level in this case that you're going to be evaluating them at. So with that, if there are not any more questions, I think that we've got all the other ones answered to date. We are buying you back a little bit of time. And for those who have indicated that you would like to test drive this, keep an eye out for a message from me shortly to get that set up. We'll set up that time and actually walk through this in more detail with you. And then for those who have indicated, there was no one who said no. So for those who have said maybe later, just keep in mind you're going to get the content of this webinar sent out to you. And then obviously I will send up a message to you personally as well to perhaps let me know when would be a good time to check back in with you. But for all of you, we wish you very great luck in this process. Hope that the AB gets moving a little bit to get you all your certification so that you can begin going out and getting contracted with this DIB base. It's really desperately going to need your help to go through this process. So with that, if there are no further questions, we want to thank everyone for their time here today. And we will be following up with you very shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.